It's another lovely day out here at the ranch. Cheers. I think today we're going to start working on that oil pan. See if we can hack a truck oil pan to fit into an A-body K-member. Let's go. So I think the first thing I'm going to do is there is this trailing edge of the K-member back here, and the oil pan's up here bolted to the block. So what I'm going to do is take my paint pen and trace along the oil pan following that trailing edge of the K-member so I know about where the sump needs to start. Okay, so that's what I got, is kind of this somewhat arcing, jagged, crooked line. I don't want to work off of curved lines. I'd rather work off a straight line. It's going to make things way easier. So what I'm looking at is the pan's flat, 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 then right up around there it starts ramping up. And that's kind of a straight line across. So I think what I'm going to do is just cut it across there. And then that will clear the K-member. Here's what I got so far. Well, this is kind of a challenge. The biggest issue I'm running into is how they have these dimples in here for the bolt holes, and I just got to work around those. There's no other way around it. Anyway, I think I squared it up to my workbench and I drew that line across. That's going to be that line. And then I was trying to figure out, okay, I'm going to have to cut it lengthwise. How do I do that? There's no straight lines on this thing. What do I measure off of? So I took my 1, 2, 3 block, put my scribe through it, and just use that to scribe a line across this pan. About like so. And that's going to be my other cut line. And it goes around here and meets back up on this side. I now have a 2-piece oil pan. You know, getting into this, I was not really sure what to expect. Okay, it's an oil pan. It's going to be a piece of sheet steel stamped in shape. Well, I get it cut off, and I'm dressing up my edges, and I look really close. This oil pan is actually 2 thinner pieces of sheet metal that's been stamped together, just one over the top. I was not expecting that. That's pretty neat. That's pretty unique. Then that got me thinking, okay, I was planning on just fabricating a box for a sump out of sheet metal and welding it on here. Well, I'm like, man, I got all these little divots in here for the bolts. Like, oh, am I gonna have to form a piece of sheet metal to fit those, or do I hammer them down flat? What do I do? I started looking at it. Okay, I'm going one-handed mode here. Bear with me. It came off like that, right? Well, what if we just flip her around? Huh. It's kind of eyeballing it. Those divots line up pretty darn close. I might have some gaps to fill in, but that's no big deal compared to fabricating the entire sump from scratch. This might just work. Well, did some grinding and some fitting on it, threw a couple of quick tack welds on it just the whole thing's in place, and I'm going to test fit it on the engine. We've got clearance. And looking at the back side, I've got plenty of clearance around the steering linkage, so nothing's going to be hitting the pan back here either. Okay, I'm going to pull it off and do a little bit more cleaning up on it to tighten up some of those gaps, so my welding is a lot easier. So, I don't think this is going to work. I went through and I got everything trimmed up the best I could to where I had the thinnest of gaps to weld. And started welding it, and it was going pretty good, but I stopped to check my progress, and this thing warped. This thing turned into a potato chip on me. I think the sheet metal that this pan is made of is just so super thin that was inevitable. The rails aren't any thicker. They're still just super thin. Like, it's maybe 20 gauge sheet metal. And it just warped really bad. And right now, I don't know that I trust it not to leak or not. So I'm going to stop on this and kind of reevaluate my situation. Am I going to buy a new oil pan? Do I try to fabricate one from scratch? We'll just have to see. Well, gang, I think I'm going to throw in the towel on the idea of modifying the truck oil pan. There's one big thing that I didn't really take into account, and that's the depth of the sump. All the aftermarket pans, the depth is around 6 inches. On mine, after I include the little protrusion for the drain plug, it's 8 inches deep, which only makes it about 4 inches away from the ground. There's the K-member. It hangs that far down. I'm going to wax that thing, no problem, and spill 6 quarts of oil all over the highway. If the warpage wasn't a bad enough problem, that's a deal breaker right there. Oh well, I tried. The oil pan project is on hiatus until I figure out what I'm going to do. But in the meantime, the UPS man arrived and brought me toys. So, let's see what he got us. Some dry erase markers, a 2022 calendar, and a power steering pump pulley. My thoughts, my ideas is to use the original Saginaw power steering box, but to do that, I need to convert it from a V-belt to a serpentine belt so that it will match the water pump pulley, the alternator, the crank pulley, etc., etc. Okay, so I've got my Saginaw pump. I pulled the V-belt pulley off of it. I've got this 6-groove serpentine pulley that I need to engineer a way to press onto here because I forgot to get the loaner tool from AutoZone. I'll figure something out. Here's what I got. I got the serpentine pulley pressed onto the Saginaw box, and I went digging through my box of spare parts, and I came up with this bracket, which is actually the power steering pump bracket for Joe Dart over there, my big block Dart. And I threw it on there just to see, well, see where it gets us, and I was able to put it on that hole and spaced it out a little bit, and man, that's pretty close. I mean, that's not bad. What I can't decide now is if I want to go ahead and use this, and I'll have to do some modifications, like I'll have to weld a little extra bit on, use that bolt hole, and I'll have to drill a hole to use that bolt hole, and then the plan is to weld on tubes for landing legs or whatever, so it's not spaced out here with nuts and bolts and washers. But that ain't bad. Then again, I'll never be able to use that bracket on that car. Or do I just redo this at a flat stock? Because if you look, it's got just a little bit of a twist to it. And maybe if I make it out of flat stock, I can get that twist out of it. Okay, so what I decided I think I'm going to do, I'd rather make one. That, and I can get rid of that little wave in there. And there was a little bit of a twist action going on with the pulley, so I just start out flat, some 1/4 inch thick. It's a little bit heavier, it's a little bit overkill actually, but I just laid this down, traced it around it, center punched my holes. So I'm going to take this over to the drill press, drill my holes out, use the bandsaw and cut out. Got this bracket going on, I got the holes drilled out. See, this is where the original bracket would have ended, and that's where I needed the third hole on the timing cover. So I think what I'm going to do is follow this line down and cut along there, and meet up with that guy. Haven't decided yet, but I could actually probably just hole saw a hole in here just to lighten things up a little bit. We'll see. Well, there she is. I used the world's worst 1.5-inch hole saw to make a little hole. Kind of cleaned up my edges on the old belt sander. I'm really thinking about taking my inch hole saw and maybe adding a couple more holes just to kind of lighten this thing up, because it's kind of heavy and I don't want that much weight hanging off the timing cover. So I was thinking, before I went any further on the power steering pump bracket fabrication, I really needed to get the oil pump on, so then I can get the timing cover on, then I could press on the vibration dampener, and then I could really get the belts aligned. If you remember, that timing cover is pretty gross and scuzzy looking, so I power washed it, scrubbed it, and then finally put it in my blast cabinet and just bead blasted it, and it cleaned up pretty good. I think I'm going to leave it like that. So I've got the factory oil pump, and I tore it apart, cleaned it up, inspected it, and really it didn't look bad. It's just a G-rotor pump, so it has like 2 moving parts. I didn't really see a whole lot of wear or anything. I'm like, well, okay, maybe I can reuse this thing. Cleaned it up, oiled it up, put it back together, and I tried to turn it, and man, it is tight. Like, I can barely get that center gear to turn. I'm like, man, I don't know. So jump on Summit Racing, looking for oil pumps, and here we go. The replacement milling pump is $115. Standard volume, standard pressure, $115 for a new pump. I'm like, okay, that's cheap peace of mind. That'll help me sleep better at night. So I get it, check it out, and oh, that's butter. So let's put a new oil pump on. Aha! Now, in case y'all are wondering, yes, I did power wash the bejesus out of this thing after I got done media blasting it. So none of that blasting media is going to get stuck anywhere in this engine. Okay, and yeah, we got a new front main seal, installed a new timing cover seal. Let's put it together. You know, the last week or two has been kind of bonkers with everything going on. But I did get this far. I got the bracket for the power steering pump made. Found a belt that would fit. I went to the hardware store and I found these little spacers to kind of bring the pump out closer to the belts. But I know it's still off just a little bit. I can take my straight edge and kind of go off the face of the alternator pulley and hold it flush there and look down, and it's got about an 1/8 inch gap. So I think what I'm going to do is, I've got a piece of sheet metal. I think I'm going to cut out something that I can use as a shim to go behind these spacers, and then I'll weld everything together so it's one unit when it is bolted up and removed. Okay, now I got this whole assembly bolted back on. Let's go ahead and grab our straight edge and check our fit. We're flush there. And we're flush there. Let's check against the crank pulley. I think we got it. Sweet. Okay, the bracket is welded up. Not my best work. I am way out of practice with the TIG. Way out of practice. Well, I just got done. Sent it through the blast cabinet, got it all cleaned up, because I'm going to powder coat this thing. I think it's going to be the next step. It's only been a few minutes, but we're going to take a sneak peek. It's starting to flow out. And there it is, powder coated. I have an Eastwood powder coating gun, and this is Eastwood's flat black, and it's just like the perfect flat black. I love it. So yeah. Okay, so future Derek here. I'm editing this video together and realized, hey, I didn't film an outro. Hey man, I'm new at this. I'm learning as I go. So anyway, here's what we look like when we're all put back together with the bracket all welded up, powder coated, bolted onto the pump. Put on a couple of AN fittings for plumbing. But yeah, that's what we got. So I think we'll wrap it up there. What did I get done this time? Well, the oil pan was a failure. Oops. But I did get the front of the engine assembled with the timing cover, the vibration dampener, all that. We got the power steering pump bracket done, the belt drive figured out. So we'll call that a win. I don't know how often I'll get these videos out. It's just kind of whenever I have time to get out here into the garage and get everything, get some work done. The hardest part right now is finding the time to edit everything together. We'll see how it goes. Maybe I'll get better at this. But hey, thanks for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one.